The last stop on Route 9. The heat in Nevada doesn't die when the sun goes down. It just gets heavier. It presses against the windshield, a suffocating, dry palm against the glass. Miller checked the odometer on his 2004 Ford F-150. He had been driving for 14 hours, hauling a trailer full of estate sale furniture from Reno to a buyer in Albuquerque. The GPS on his phone had died 3 hours ago, right around the time the static overtook the classic rock station. He was navigating by dead reckoning and a fading memory of a paper map he glanced at in a gas station in Tonopah. He was on Route 9, or what was left of it. The asphalt here was cracked, veins of hardy scrub brush breaking through the blacktop. There were no street lights, just the sweeping cones of his headlights cutting through the infinite, suffocating dark. Then he saw the glow. It wasn't the harsh sodium orange of a highway interchange. It was pink, a soft, buzzing, electric pink neon. As Miller drew closer, the shape resolved itself. It was a diner, structured like a shimmering silver bullet, gleaming under an open 24 hours sign that flickered with a rhythmic, insectoid buzz. A massive neon cowboy stood atop the roof, his mechanical arm waving a lasso back and forth, back and forth. The Rusty Spur. Miller slowed down. He didn't remember a diner being out here on this dead stretch of road, but his bladder was full, his throat was full of dust, and the fuel gauge was leaning uncomfortably toward thee. He pulled into the gravel lot. It was empty, save for a pristine, cherry-red 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air parked near the entrance. The chrome on the car was so polished it looked wet. Miller stepped out of the truck. The silence of the desert usually had a sound. The wind, the coyotes, the rustle of sagebrush. Here there was nothing, just the hum. The neon sign buzzed so loudly he could feel it in his teeth. He pushed open the glass door. A bell chimed, a cheerful, tinny sound that seemed too loud for the small space. Inside, the air was freezing. The air conditioning was blasting, smelling faintly of ozone and old grease. The interior was a checkerboard of black and white tiles, red vinyl booths, and chrome jukeboxes at every table. Sideniwa Shug. The voice came from behind the counter. A waitress stood there. She was the picture of 1950s Americana nostalgia. A yellow uniform with a white apron, hair teased into a high beehive, bright red lipstick. Her name tag read Betty. Miller sat at a booth near the window. He looked around. The diner was empty, except for a man in a gray suit sitting in the back corner, facing the wall. The man was perfectly still. "Coffee?" Betty asked. She was at his table instantly. He hadn't heard her walk over. "Please." "Black," Miller said, rubbing his eyes. "And a slice of pie if you got it. Cherry. Fresh out of the oven," she beamed. Her smile was wide, impossibly wide. It stretched just a fraction of an inch too far towards her ears. Miller watched her pour the coffee. The liquid was thick, dark as motor oil. He took a sip. It tasted burnt, with a metallic undercurrent, like sucking on a penny. "How long you folks been out here?" Miller asked, trying to shake the unease settling in his gut. "I didn't think this road saw much traffic." Betty didn't look up from her notepad. "Oh, we get plenty of visitors. People always need a place to rest, to stop moving." She placed the pie in front of him. The cherries were a vibrant, violet red, glistening in a gel that looked too viscous. Miller looked at the man in the back corner. Quiet night for him, though. Betty turned her head. Her body didn't move, just her neck, swiveling with a smoothness that reminded Miller of an owl. "Mr. Henderson? Oh, he's a regular. He's been finishing that coffee for a very long time." Miller looked closer at Mr. Henderson. The man's hand was gripping a coffee mug. The skin on his hand was gray and papery. There was a layer of dust on the shoulder of his suit jacket. A cold drop of sweat rolled down Miller's spine. "I need to use the restroom," Miller said, standing up. "Down the hall, past the kitchen," Betty said. She was still smiling. She hadn't blinked yet. Miller walked toward the back. As he passed the kitchen, he glanced through the service window. There was no stove, no chef, nor refrigerated. The kitchen was filled with dirt, just a mound of red Nevada earth piled high to the ceiling, with thick, pulsing roots protruding from the soil, hooked up to the soda fountains and the coffee machines. The roots throbbed rhythmically, pumping dark fluids into the pipes that fed the dining room. Miller froze. He backed away, his boots squeaking on the tile. The music from the jukeboxes stopped. The silence was sudden and violent. "You didn't eat your pie, sugar." Betty's voice came from the dining area. It wasn't cheerful anymore. It was a low, grinding rasp like gravel in a blender. Miller turned. Betty was standing in the aisle. Her jaw had unhinged, dropping to her chest. The skin of her face was splitting, revealing that the skin was just a carapace. Underneath, there was something wet and raw, muscle fibers twitching. The neon lights outside flickered and died, plunging the diner into shadow. The only light came from the kitchen, a dull, bioluminescent red emanating from the roots in the dirt. Mr. Henderson, the man in the corner, finally moved. He collapsed into a pile of dust and dried bones, his suit empty. "We need the biomass, Miller," the thing wearing Betty's face hissed. "The desert is so dry." Miller didn't scream. He ran. He threw his shoulder against the glass front door. It didn't budge. It wasn't glass anymore. It felt soft, rubbery, like cartilage. The thing lunged. Miller grabbed a metal napkin dispenser and swung it blindly. It connected with a wet thud, tearing through the waitress's false face. It shrieked, a sound that was half human scream, half coyote yip. Miller scrambled over a booth and kicked the side window. This one shattered. He tumbled out onto the gravel, gasping for the hot night air. The diner was changing. The silver siding was rippling, turning into gray, callous skin. The neon sign wasn't buzzing electricity. It was the vibration of millions of wings. The Rusty Spur wasn't a building. It was a mouth, a massive, semi-buried organism waiting by the roadside like an anglerfish. Miller sprinted to his truck. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them. Thump. Something heavy landed on the hood of the truck. Miller looked up. The giant neon cowboy from the roof had crawled down. It wasn't metal. It was a massive, spindly limb of the creature, shaped to look like a man, glowing with that bioluminescent lore. Its lasso was a long, prehensile tongue. Miller grabbed the keys from the dirt, jammed them into the ignition, and twisted. The Ford roared to life. He threw it into reverse, tires screaming as they tore up the gravel. The cowboy limbs smashed through the windshield, glass exploding into the cab. The tongue lashed out, wrapping around Miller's forearm. It burned like acid. Miller stomped on the gas. The truck bucked backward, tearing the tongue loose with a sickening tear. He spun the truck around and floored it, hitting the asphalt of Route 9 at 80 miles an hour. He didn't look in the rear view mirror. He didn't slow down. He drove until the sun came up, until the gas tank was dry, and until he hit the outskirts of Las Vegas. He rolled into a crowded gas station at 7 a.m., surrounded by tourists and commuters. He sat in the cab for 20 minutes, just shaking, staring at the burn mark on his arm. It was shaped like a perfect circle. He walked into the station to pay for gas. The attendant was a young kid with acne and headphones around his neck. "Rough night?" the kid asked, eyeing the shattered windshield and the blood on Miller's shirt. "Yeah," Miller croaked. "Something like that." He went to the cooler to grab a water. As he reached for the handle, he froze. On the shelf, next to the sandwiches, was a row of cherry pies. The packaging was bright and cheerful. Star-Spangled Sweets, the label read, made fresh at the Rusty Spur. Miller watched as the cherry filling inside the plastic wrap shifted, just slightly, and pressed against the wrapper like it was trying to get out.